Hello there, it is time for another part of my Medewi campaign commentaries. In the last part we saw Ozulkis attacking Kyrenike and taking their city without fighting their army by rushing in at night and just having the capture point. Very sneaky. Arrakkamani over in Arabia faced a decisive field battle with one of Saba's main forces. He was able to maneuver his way to a victory there. Ozulkis declared war on Orgla, an independent faction out in the desert that is part of Libya, so it's a nice place to take. And finally Arrakkamani faced an even more decisive battle against most of Saba's main forces where, with a little help from his baggage train, he was able to win. We'll start off taking a little look at Ozulkis' war with Orgla. I had originally thought they would just come and attack me if I stood near them after declaring war, but they didn't really do anything, so I'm going to move forwards and just raid just over the border in their territory to be annoying. Technically there's probably nothing out there, we've just stepped over an arbitrary line in the desert, however this may annoy the AI and prompt them to come at me. I get some news from Saba. They want a peace deal and are offering quite a lot of money. I was very pleased to see that because it means they don't have any more armies. That's how I read that peace deal anyway, so I was willing very much to continue the war. We learn next that the Carthaginians are reforming their military, and this could be relevant to us because we do actually border the Carthaginian Empire right on the very edge in Libya, so we'll keep an eye on them. Now Arrakkamani, despite his force being damaged from the previous engagements, needs to get on and try and make something of his wins by taking some territory, so we're going to take this walled settlement from Saba if we can. The army inside is pretty big, it's got a big advantage on the balance bar against us, so we'll just have to wait for now, start constructing some siege equipment to find our way inside and see what we can do with that. Now back over with Orgla. They didn't really do anything, but I noticed they have their army not actually in the settlement. It just looks a bit like it from a distance. They're fortified just outside the settlement. That means that the settlement can be attacked separately. That big army will then come in as reinforcements. Now my first thought was that what we could do here is fight this battle and bring our army over to the western part of the map and just try to destroy the enemy's main force as it comes in, and then if we have enough men left, go and take their town, or otherwise just go back to besieging them and siege them out. So I was going over the enemy's army composition and having a think about what the strategy might be and how viable it is. Then I remembered that we can do night attack, and that solves the problems very readily indeed. That means the main force is not allowed to take part in the fight, so we'll just kill the small garrison and the main force will have to watch. And that means that Ozulkis will be literally taking the settlement overnight, and so shocking is this that the main force just disbands and disappears, the faction is destroyed, it's all taken with virtually no losses. A miraculous victory from Ozulkis. That went a lot easier than expected, so now we'll have better control over Libya. The rest of it is currently controlled by our allies. We get news that Ma'in, a Arabian faction to the north of our current position, has joined the war of Saba against us, and they're right here. So potentially they could come down and start interfering with our plans to take more territory. That's a motivation to just speed things up, as is the arrival of a small Saba army. Nothing much there. The only problem is that armies tend to get bigger, so we could do with getting into the town as soon as possible. I needed at least another turn to get the siege equipment that I felt comfortable with. After that turn, you can see the Saba army move closer, got some more mercenaries, it's recruiting more units now, so it seems the situation is going to get worse if we don't do something now, so I'm going to make this city assault. We can of course use night attack to mean that those units outside don't take part in the fight, so that is great. We don't have all the siege equipment I had planned to take, but we'll try something, and the balance bar, thanks to that siege equipment, has swung in our favour, but we shall see about that. I'm setting up with two attack groups mainly, one from the west, one from the east. The western one was meant as a distraction to draw the enemy over so that the eastern one could attack unopposed. However, I think I put too much stuff in the eastern one. I shouldn't have brought all my cav over here because the enemy ended up defending against both attacks, and I thought, well, we'll just go ahead and attack anyway. It would be possible to gradually walk guys around the outside of the map to change the situation, but I'm not going to bother. Let's just make an opposed attack on the wall. I do have 2 units coming in from the south which will be able to get in unopposed right now, so that is nice. All we do then is wait for our siege equipment to reach the walls. The towers will be first to inflict damage as they just spit out some of our troops into the enemy's ranks. Now these enemy garrison spear units aren't particularly special. Their stats are quite low in comparison to my medium infantry, so I was expecting our men to just go in there, hack them up and capture some wall. But you can see the towers at either end of this stretch of the wall are dropping quite a lot of fire onto our men, and that's going to make a big difference, as we'll see. Over here, another attack happening where some of our troops were unopposed at first, so can now rear-attack the men who are focusing on stopping my ladders. That's all well and good. And a few enemy units just falling back at a very opportune moment for us. Nice of them to abandon the walls just as we attack. Our move coming from the south was unopposed, as I thought it might be, and we'll just take that tower to secure a position and then wait to see what we'll do with those troops. And on the west side of town, nothing happening. That's just what we want. We'll just keep staring at the enemy with all of our archers to make sure they don't put too many troops over here to try and stop us getting in with our heavier men. So we're just going to wait. We have to try and defeat some of these units in melee. It should happen eventually. One unit here goes down, meaning both of our units coming from the southern part of this attack can now focus on the one in front of them. A little bit awkward because both units can't really fight it at the same time, and now that they're all clumped up here, the tower that's firing into them is going to have a nice easy time. Pretty hard for them to miss in this situation. We're going to rectify that in a bit. Right now, just enjoying the glitchiness of having a couple of units standing on top of each other on the walls. Things always get fun on walls as the collisions go insane. Now jumping back over to that first unit that was in a bit more trouble, you can see if you look at the kills on the thing on the left there, they've got a lot of kills against our enemy, and the enemy doesn't have many kills back against us, and yet our unit's in big trouble. That's just because of that tower fire. They are thinning out our unit very rapidly. It's actually not going very well, and the same fate may happen to the other units over here, but I did pull one out to come and sit down here in front of the gate where they can neutralize it. This will stop it from firing, and eventually we can capture it if we take out all the enemies on top of it as well. It needs to be totally clear, the capture point for us to have the towers for ourselves. Right now though, we'll just have to get shot by them since we need to stand right in front of it in order to do that neutralization, so it's going to be costly. Hopefully it will be worth it. Those units that came in on the southern part of the wall can now arrive to help out. We'll capture another tower and bring those troops in to help in the fight, but for those men who came in on that first siege tower, it's too late. They actually routed due to losses taken from that tower fire, and then they were completely destroyed because they were surrounded, so gifting lots of kills to those low-level spear units. I was looking around trying to see if any of them survived. Usually you see survivors escaping out through the gates. I'm not sure if it happened in this case. But anyway, we've now got a decent amount of stuff around the gates. They're neutralized, and the enemy brought some units back from the center to contest it once again. Now though, with my Royal Murray spearmen here, this is going to be pretty easy. You can hold them off with a phalanx. This other unit of axemen was doing okay. We were fighting a couple of units of spears at the same time actually, but things ended up going a little bit awry, as we'll see in a second. In came my two-handed axemen, who also came in as part of that group from the southern approach, and they're going to have a very easy time as it turns out. These spearmen just get annihilated by this flank attack. Our axemen one by one with no mercy, just cutting them down, and the enemy spears barely even paying us attention. Many of them seem reluctant to even look at what's going on right now. So that unit that I mentioned that was in trouble actually got rear attacked technically by some archers who ran down off the wall like they were running back to the centre of town. The rear attack routed my unit, and then it actually got annihilated because it was in the middle of fighting an enemy unit which was about to rout itself. So things just suddenly turned around. I lost the unit. That wasn't very good. However, we do still have our two-handed axemen who are just going to come around the flanks and destroy everything, although as you can see, the enemy's archers getting caught in this melee prove much better than their spearmen at dodging and deflecting those deadly axe blows. So a tiny bit later, we do sort everything out. Everything around here is routing, and our men are going to delight in just slaughtering the enemies as they try to escape. They really shouldn't try to escape at a walk through our ranks, so perhaps they are to blame for what happened to them there. With that done, we still have a tiny bit of work to do if we want to capture the gate, because they do have that unit up on the wall still. It's, for whatever reason, proving very hard to defeat from the front. Now though, we can rear attack it by just popping up behind them from this door and sneaking in for a fight. I noticed some javelins raining down there. I wondered where they were coming from. It's our own men just throwing them very inaccurately forward towards the general enemy direction. Not very helpful, but anyway, that unit shatters from the rear attack we're giving it right there. So now we can start capturing that gate, allowing all of our cavalry and camels waiting outside a chance into the town. So now we're going to progress to phase 2 of the plan, and that is taking the central capture point without facing all of the guys who are waiting for us in the western part of the city. I advanced with 3 units of our Mero guards. They are going to be in their phalanx formation, so these spearmen coming at them won't be able to do anything. But more importantly, I was hoping to tank all of this Jav-Cav fire. The enemy had quite a lot of skirmish cavalry defending the centre, so these guys with their metal shields and their phalanx formation, which increases block chance, are best able to just tank that fire and make sure it doesn't do all that much, and it seems to work pretty well. Plus, at the same time, their phalanx will give them a bonus fighting against these spearmen, because now our melee defense will be so high that these guys have no chance of killing us. We can just gradually surround them, they rout and start getting out of there easy enough. Now we'll start moving towards the centre of the town to take it, although we're going to move pretty slowly since these guys are in phalanx formation. They're just creeping, keeping their shields ready. There's something very satisfyingly dreadful about the slowly moving phalanx wall there, just waiting for something to dare come and attack it. Meanwhile, a much less orderly attack is going on. I came in to attack the centre from a different direction with some axe troops there, catching some cavalry there, which is nice. My own camel is going to get in to try and bypass all of the enemy and get behind them, and providing the distraction for this manoeuvre is the two-handed axeman, always eager to get some more fighting. So we do manage to get around them, and the main objective is to take down those Jav-Cav, because the camels are able to tank the javelins in that they're so expensive as mercenary units that it doesn't matter if they die, and once they get close enough they inflict a morale shock against cavalry because horses are scared of how camels smell or something like that, and they just rout straight away. So that's nice and easy. We'll clear up everything there, and now we'll have plenty of free access to the enemy's rear flanks, and all of my spearmen, finally out of phalanx formation, are going to power walk in to start making that capture. These troops fighting against my distractionary attack have no chance now that our camels come in for their rear attack. We'll destroy them, and the enemy's commander is among these troops as well. So just to really hammer it home, we'll take out that commander. Not that it matters, because we're just going to sit on the capture point from this point in the battle and wait for the battle to be over. They did start bringing some units back to try and take it back from us, but they had no chance. I think they only sent 1 unit, and we had our whole army just standing here waiting to delay them. So the timer ran down before much more fighting happened. That's a decisive victory. The town is taken. Actually ended up being a bit harder than I thought it would be, but still easy enough. On the results here, we see that we did actually lose a full unit in that battle. That'll be the one that was taking all that tower fire. So that's unfortunate. The local culture prevents us from hiring many troops, but we might just about be able to replace 1 unit. We'll see what it looks like after all the replenishment's gone through. If we can get replenishment, but we'll talk about that in a second. We're moving on in. The enemy army completely destroyed because all the guys who didn't take part in the fight just count as being killed. So a pretty good trade, and we are in, but we're taking attrition immediately on the inside, so that's a pretty bad sign. This region has no supplies in it, and this is going to be the region's defining trait for this campaign, because the lack of supplies means we take attrition while we're in it. I don't think the AI takes attrition while they're in it. I'm not completely sure actually, but I think the AI doesn't take part in the supply system in the same way the player does. So our army standing there takes attrition and theirs doesn't, even though there's not enough food for both of us combined. I think that's how it's calculating it anyway. You can see there we have a big negative supply reserve, basically meaning there's no supplies, basically meaning your units die whenever they're in this region, and it's going to take a very long time to reverse that trend because out here in the desert it's very hard to build up a reserve of supplies. Seeing this actually pretty dire situation, I immediately went back to Saba and decided to take them up on their previous offer of giving us loads of money in exchange for peace, because we're only going to get weaker from here, so we need to make this offer as soon as possible. We can get the maximum amount of money we're allowed to ask for off them here, which is pretty nice. So we'll get a bit rich, we'll guarantee they're not going to attack us for a little bit, and see if we can work things out. Meanwhile, Ozulkis is moving east from Orgula because after unifying half of Libya, he's probably thinking about taking the rest, and that territory is of course controlled by the allied forces that he was part of creating, in fact. I was looking at Siwa here, noting their main force is quite far away from their home settlement, meaning we could take their home settlement easier than the other one to the north, Marmarike, whatever they were called. But the other thing to consider is they really like us, and this situation is really stable, so by attacking one of our own allies, we might destabilize things, and I thought, why don't we look to the west instead? There's a tribe I don't remember the name of, one of these kingdoms that is basically the Garamantians in Attila, that's how I remember them, from their little capital of Garama, I think it's called in fact. And yes, I thought we might as well actually go for them instead. Let's try a more legitimate tactic. We'll march over there and see how things look on the other side of Libya before we start fighting our own allies. For Arrakkamani, the only thing we can do is abandon our recently taken territory. The supply system works on a regional basis, so it's not the whole province, which is nice. Meaning if we just move back south to where we came into Arabia, there are plenty of supplies there, so we can just wait around in a different area of the desert and be okay, and we may be able to arrange some replenishment at some point as well. Still, going to take a while for us to get back into ship shape. Now while we wait, I thought we might get Lakamazes back into the action. I'm going to start a new army over in Ethiopia. It needs to start over there so we have access to our own culture's troops. So we can build an army there and then sail it over. I can use my navy with the supply ships to get them over without dying. That way, once we go back to war with Saba, which we'll want to do eventually to complete Arabia Felix, we'll have an easier time. Now Ozulkis arrived at the border with our western neighbour, and once I was there I had second thoughts. I realised how far away the enemy settlement was and that it's going to be pretty heavily defended, and thought maybe we shouldn't attack them, maybe this is going to be quite difficult. Then I started looking at the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians are at war with lots of people already, and they don't like us, meaning they're a more viable war target. They have two regions nearby, and you can see down there that Rome actually controls the other two regions in Africa, meaning that these two regions are isolated. Now the balance bar for their empire suggests that as a faction they are much stronger than us, so that means they still have lots of territory elsewhere, probably in Spain or Western Africa. But still, I thought this does make them an interesting potential target. I'm going to move to their border and think about that more next turn, essentially. So here we are in the next turn. I'm thinking about it again, and what I thought was, actually that's going to be really hard to take down Carthage, because our army's not all that good, and although Carthage probably doesn't have any armies around here, they have a lot of power on that balance bar, so they could just bring something over to smash Ozulkis if something went wrong. So I had second thoughts and ended up not doing anything right there. Now we get a new heir to the faction. It's Kashta. Apparently Arrakkamani had a son, and now he has come of age to join the political sphere and start doing things. So here he is. He's a bit of a mixed bag. He's got an economic background, but he's also wasteful, histrionic as it puts it, which gives him loads of economic debuffs. So him leading an army makes things more expensive, essentially. And that could be a problem, but we've got lots of money right now, so we're not going to shy away from him. Now, last thing about Ozulkis, the drama of what to do with him ended with me just saying, you know what, I'm going to start disbanding his army slowly but surely, because I thought we're going to focus all of our money on the Arabian theatre for now, so Ozulkis will have to wait around. There's an intrigue. Someone tried to assassinate Lakamazes while I was building up his force, and actually after I'd already departed with the force, so what I decided to do is replace him with our new family member, Kashta. So we'll say that Arrakkamani's son was joining his brother for the voyage over to Arabia and can now take command of the forces coming in. The big problem, which some of you may have predicted would happen here, is that now that we have even more armies in Arabia, the lack of supplies is even more of a problem. So what we have to do is just sprint through the bit with low supplies to get into enemy territory. We'll be fine once we're in their territory because they hopefully have some supplies over there for us to use. So it's just a run of attrition. I'm going to go in two different directions to allow our forces to leave the region quicker and to cover both of the angles that Saba might come at us from. The other option, by the way, would be to sail by sea to transport the armies around to Mascat there and land them. The only problem is our supply ships actually don't hold enough supplies to make the journey because transport ships are really slow. They're slower than walking for some reason, which is a bit of a shame since that would have made more sense. So anyway, we're just going to tank the attrition, and in the next part we'll join the action once we get back into enemy territory.